Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. There is a second day of the conference Resilience as a Task, how to help people in fragile regions to cope with complex crises ahead of us. In the morning, there will be two panels. First, will be focused on how to foster resilience of local communities via complex solutions. The second one will be focusing on Ukraine, particularly on the stabilization and reconstruction aspects. Then there will be a lunch break. After lunch break, there are two workshops. One focusing on innovation in development in relation to food security. It will start at 2 o'clock here in this room. They need some more technical devices than the other workshop. The other workshop is on Concord Aid Watch 2022 report that will be more described in detail. It will take place in that corner with the small screen. We will be finishing around 4:30 or maybe a bit later. And for those who still will have a chance to stay here, there is again a space on the 7th floor for a small refreshment and saying goodbye and so on. Also, I would like to ask audience to come with some questions to the panelists so that the debates are more lively and it's not only panelists today who will be reacting one to another. And last but not least, and this is most difficult on every conference, is to get back the evaluation forms. So please, you find them on the chairs. And please try to fill it in, and it's the one option is you will fill it. The second option is that we will anyway be sending it electronically, and we will ask you for your evaluations. So, but the experience says what is done on the paper at the end of the actions, it's usually much easier, and the return rate is much higher than the electronic ones. So please keep it in mind. And now I give a floor to the moderator of the first panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I would like to introduce myself. My name is Lenka Suchá. I'm from the Global Change Research Institute of the Czech Academy of Sciences, so I am a researcher as myself, and I'm really happy to be a moderator of this panel called How to Foster Resilience of Local Communities via Complex Solutions. And yesterday we were quite a lot talking about policies and finances, and even though we were some practical cases, so we were always tending to start talking about these really important topics because we need to get funding, right, for our projects. But today I would like to get more into the practical side of the project implementation, and I would like to really focus on what are the complex solutions, what are the challenges and the benefits and limitations of these solutions. And I'm really happy that we can learn these from quite a diverse variety of actors, because we have representatives of EU, of NGOs, private sector, as well as universities. And with this, I would like to introduce once again Marta Ubeda Rodriguez, who works as a policy officer at DG INPA at European Commission, and she will be talking about humanitarian development peace nexus. Then I would like to introduce Mr. Petr Němec, who works as a researcher and project manager at Mendel University, and they will be talking together with Monika Sedláková from Holistic Solutions. And they will share their experience with cooperation between university and private sector. Then once again, welcome to Richard Walker from people in need, who works as a regional director for Africa, and he will bring us some perspective about community participation and engagement in the RR. And then we have also Eric Siegel, who's the head of projects in Diaconia, and who will share some critical perspectives on complex solutions in humanitarian crisis. And at the end, we have also Mr. Pavel Růžička from Empress, who's a director and who will introduce action plans for green cities, including technical solutions. So with this, I will give a floor to Marta, if she can start with her contribution on development peace nexus, humanitarian development peace nexus.
I'm not sure. Oh yeah, it's working.
And sorry, I just forgot to tell that the format will be the same like yesterday. So you have all like 6 minutes for your presentation. And I really like the system that Osa was introducing with the finger pointing. So when there's like a 5 minutes, so I will point my finger, and then you have 1 minute to finish. So okay, floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. We were invited indeed by the fantastic organizers of this conference for this panel, delve a bit more into details on what the humanitarian development peace nexus approach is being conceptualized as in the European Commission and particularly in the INPA, and also to make a link with the Team Europe initiatives as precisely two of the complex solutions we are putting forward in order to tackle the complex crisis we are facing, and particularly in the local dimension. So for those of you that were here yesterday, we already sort of conceptualized the big aspects of the major aspects of the HDP Nexus, and now I will delve a bit more into the specificities of the way we operationalize it. And there are 6 major tools that we use for this purpose. First one is solid coordination frameworks. What we try to do is to develop standard operating procedures between the actors of the 3 dimension, humanitarian development and peace actors, in order for them to have some sort of a structure exchanges and ways of working, which may sound very basic, but it's really the stepping stone for everything that we do, and to be able to coordinate the actions that we do. Then what we've been increasingly doing is to strengthen our cooperation with member states. And one of the ways we, of course, have been doing this is the famous Team Europe initiatives that you've for sure heard a lot about. This is a unique animal. This is something that it's work in progress, is in the making. It's the first time that it's happening, and it's been a learning process all the way. There are a big number of them, 12 if I'm not wrong, that already have been particularly identified as good vehicles for the HDP Nexus, because these are coordination mechanisms the same way that under the HDP Nexus we can have other coordination mechanisms, and they are complementary, and they can be used in simultaneous and productive way for each other. Then something that we've been also doing, it's creating a dedicated task force in country or in headquarters, not only with EU actors, but also with other external actors, in order for these humanitarian development peace nexus actors to exchange on ideas. And as we were saying yesterday, for those of you that were here in the first panel, something that we are trying to work more on, and that I would be very particularly keen to hear from the other panelists as well, or the audience, it's on how can we integrate better the local actors in these task forces and these coordinating mechanisms in general. The second tool that we've been using, and that also it's very related with several points that were made in the panels yesterday, it's the joint analytical frameworks. What we are trying to do is understand the root causes of where the problem is coming from. Someone said a sentence that I really liked yesterday, that was, we need to try to make the problem not happen, not only to address it, but also try to make the problem not to happen. And it's something that we've been doing through several systems of joint analysis, but particularly with our new financing instrument in DIKI. We have a mandatory requirement to conduct what we call conflict analysis screening, where we do try to involve more and more civil society actors, because their input is, of course, fundamental to know what is happening on the field. Then the third tool that we have, it's what we call joint up planning. This can be, of course, joint programming, but it's not only limited to that. It can be in a broader sense, establishing broader collective outcomes between all those sorts of actors and building, of course, in the joint analysis that we have conducted previously, and trying to align our actions to work towards those collective outcomes. The fourth tool that we have is a joint advocacy strategy, which is fundamental, speaking with one voice, of course within it, respecting each of our mandates and messages, but speaking with one voice. The fifth one is something that was also very much commented upon yesterday, that is the integration of the peace element. We need to interact with the political and the security actors. It's fundamental in order to build a sustainable peace. And the last but not least, we have the appropriate, what we call the appropriate financing mechanisms. This means within each of the actors' own mechanisms, of course, trying to align, as we said, our objectives to contributing to collective outcomes, but at the same time, if needed, this can be specific mechanisms, like it can be pooled funding, for example. And yeah, as we said yesterday, very keen on hearing all of sorts of particular good practices, examples that the other panelists or the audience may have. Just as I said yesterday, I ran out of paper getting ideas yesterday, so I hope I ran out of paper again today. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that there was quite a lot being said about working together and this joint cooperation. And I think that it's the perfect time to give floor to Monika Sedláková from Holistic Solution and Petr Němec from Mendel University, because I think that this is a great example of working jointly on something. So, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to share a little bit from what we learned during 12 years of development projects implementation in Ethiopia, and then to tell how it works, this working together between the university and the private sector. So the Mendel University has quite a long history in development issues, because in 60s, 70s, 80s years of last century, many people from development countries studied on our university. Now they work often in state administration back in their country. So for us, of course, it's kind of advantage when we come there to implement the project. They work as icebreakers or facilitators. They are helping in to really break the ice in this sometimes difficult bureaucracy. About the year 2000, the students started to come back, so I believe it will work also in the future. And the Mendel University at the time started to implement the projects of let's say modern Czech official development aid. First, we faced, of course, some challenges because our first project was about the rehabilitation of degraded lands, and these lands are degraded because of the habits of the local peoples, which are often include the improper management of the land. And to change these habits or influence positively these habits, it's not easy. So then we really recognize it as a challenge, and we started to think what to do with that. The expert solutions were not a problem, but really the long-term influence on these people, on the people's habits, was necessary. So of course we faced much more challenges, like for example the migration of young people because of the not enough work opportunities for them. So that's why we had to combine different instruments of the project, of the development aid or cooperation, not just these bilateral projects, which are let's say the basic instrument of Czech development aid, but also we included the educational projects, which, as being university, it's our topic, of course. So we developed the cooperation between Mendel University and, in this case, Arba Minch University, which is in south of Ethiopia. And we created kind of consortium with this Arba Minch University, with some local authorities, and also the private sector in Czech Republic or private sector in Ethiopia. To this, also we combined it with the research projects financed by European Commission, and with this B2B projects from Czech Development Agency, which were, let's say, implemented by the private sector, but some people from Mendel University also participated. Some point which is all connecting it is a training center which we developed there, and where the farmers and also school children and also the university students are attending trainings and practical workshops. Then we found during this that really to have a positive impact on the habits of local people, it's much easier, of course, when you work with the primary school children or secondary school children. So that's why it's always included in the projects which we are doing. One let's say challenge which I mentioned is the migration of young people, because Arba Minch, the area is very rural, and the people there live from the agriculture mainly. So we had to find out how to keep the people there. And so we started, or we tried to create the added value in the field, let's say, or directly on the place, which is by supporting the local entrepreneurs and local cooperatives which are producing something and processing, of course. And with this helps us the partners from Czech Republic. Namely, here is Holistic Solutions, which is our partner company. And I think now I can give word to Monika.
Thank you, Peter. And I will build up on what you have said about the Permaculture Center, because I think it's a good practice and it's a very nice example of private and academia sector partnership, because this place is like a connecting element which brings together academia, private sector, and as well local communities. Currently, we are together with Mendel University looking for ways to promote this place through ecotourism. And we think it can generate at least some, at the beginning, some financial resources to cover expenses of these local communities to operation of the center, and later on we hope it can generate even the profit for the local communities. Well, with the implementing development activities in Ethiopia, our company, together with Mendel University, especially Peter here, we found out that there's a plant, Moringa oleifera, which is highly widespread and produced here and consumed by local people on a daily basis, and is traditionally used as a medicine on various health problems. And we saw a huge potential here. So we used B2B tool from Czech Development Agency. We managed successfully to start a business here with Moringa, while involving here a women community from Arba Minch producing Moringa. Our business is based on fair trade, and thanks to close cooperation with Mendel University, this community is further involved in other development projects, so we can further provide them with trainings like business skills, improvement of quality of products, hygiene techniques, and so on. These communities also sell Moringa on their own in Ethiopia, not only to us, to Czech Republic. And moreover, more customers mean more planting of moringa trees in landscape, which helps to prevent erosion of the landscape. And this is a very good adaptation strategy to climate change. Well, our partnership with Mendel University is very positive that we can share together our experience, our different perspective on different issues. It brings us together and it can move forward both sides, and then we can find together the best solution for the communities and their needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. That was really interesting, and I think that it's really important, this sort of like a cooperation, that we are moving forward, and I think that it very nicely relates to what we were talking yesterday, that resilience shouldn't be just about bouncing back and maintaining the status quo, but that it's really important to also think of this progress in terms, and I think that the work you are doing kind of proves that it's possible. So thanks a lot for your contribution. And now I would like to invite Richard Walker from People in Need, who will share something about participation and engagement, which is definitely a key element of our joint forces for resilience.
Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, I'm not sure in 6 minutes you can really give a definitive overview of community engagement in DRR and DRM. That sounds a bit more like an emergency than a DRR approach, really, but I'll give it my best shot. Because of that, I'll also avoid the whole discussion and debate around the funding mechanisms for DRR programs, but maybe just say that if we consider that DRR is humanitarian in its intent to mitigate shock, but it needs a developmental framework for its implementation and scale up. This conundrum in terms of the funding is yet to be solved, and I'm hoping maybe we'll get somewhere with that today. But communities are and will remain the center of the work we do. Their involvement in the design and delivery of any DRR, DRM programs is absolutely essential. This is the only way we'll be able to transfer ownership, and it's the only way that we'll have any hope of sustaining the approaches or scaling up in the future. Evidence is quite clear on that. But of course, we are struggling to align, again, this community approach and their ideas with donor-mandated programs. We often see these ideas and options falling through the gaps. We see enough, I think, maybe the question here, and perhaps this is a little bit too much, is this because we're not listening enough? Or is this because we still perhaps fall back on we know what's best for them to a certain extent? I think we do have to question that. We see major improvements in technology, particularly in telecommunications, that helps to facilitate this dialogue with the communities. So we've got no excuses. Innovations such as the toy model that PIN uses in Asia, which is essentially a mobile app, allowing communities to be able to design their own risks, define them, and design the mitigation actions to be taken with them, allows this to feed into a centralized system. And then when these shocks are coming, funders, donors, etc., have already the tools to be able to support priorities that are defined. As a byproduct, of course, this is an advocacy tool and influences policy development. Early warning systems in Cambodia or in Ethiopia, where surveillance of water levels, either in rivers or at pump sites, allow not only a response time improvement in terms of maintenance, but also allow us to monitor trends. Again, preparation for potential shocks like floods or droughts. Safety net programs that are being put in place. There was one in Zambia for COVID cash, which identifies the most vulnerable people, and when we see epidemics, or it can be applied to other shocks, those people can be immediately targeted because we are prepared already for these eventualities. These kind of funding and safety nets, of course, are quite a nice vehicle for donors, governments, etc., to be able to support development of in-country and strengthen their systems. Time is of the essence in these situations, of course, and we know that with early warning systems, the more time we can give communities, the better their response is and the mitigation actions that they take. And this is absolutely strictly proportional. So the longer term planning you have, the better and more effective your response is. These tools also engage private sector. We've talked a little bit about this here, but we're talking more about the telecommunications companies, the banks, etc., most of which have CSR policies, and we should be leveraging them to get them more engaged in these approaches. Other complex solutions in nutrition, which of course for us is one of our most serious concerns in Africa for the coming years. Promoting and protecting nutritional status of women and children are absolutely critical to ensure better resilience and faster recovery. The community approach to managing malnutrition in DRC essentially trains communities to be able to diagnose cases early enough to get them to the clinics, to the health centres in time. Earlier presentation has better treatment outcomes, and it's this kind of training, etc., that is relatively simple but makes a huge difference. In WASH, the Czech-funded resilience programs in Mali not only tackle natural resource management and the protection of water sources, but build infrastructure such as dams which protect communities from flooding. These also bring diversification in terms of food and livelihoods through fish farming or reclaimed agricultural land, and smart agricultural activities enable production of more improved nutritious food. The key issue, therefore, is not just about time, but it's taking a holistic and integrated approach that addresses multiple needs or has byproducts that address multiple needs in those communities across all, well, let's say most, if not all sectors. Conflict itself is driven by multiple factors and impacts differently on different populations. Peace building as one of the legs of the triple nexus becomes more important as we see the impact of conflict on the psychological health of displaced and traumatized populations, and of course on their resilience. Gender-related issues become more apparent, and women, children and the disabled are much more impacted by these shocks, as the recent World Bank study confirms. So the better we understand what drives the differentiated outcomes of disaster impacts for different populations, the better our policies and interventions can be tailored to strengthen resilience for all of them. Resilience at that point then becomes DRR in itself. But we can only have this understanding, we can only create this tailoring if we have the communities engaged and completely involved and owning the process from the beginning. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I think that it was really inspiring, and also I think that you really made nice base for Eric Siegel from Diakonia, who will be talking more critically about these complex solutions, because so far we were learning rather about good practice examples, and now there's a floor for some critical insight. So,
thank you. Somehow?
It's working.
Okay, it's working. Thank you. Due to the limited time, I will also rather throw some of the observation than have a structured presentation. I had a chance recently to visit refugee camps hosting Malian and Somali refugees in neighboring countries and observe firsthand how insufficient is, for example, the medical assistance there, medical care. And this brought me to to my starting point that unless first things come first in this acute or protracted crisis, something very essential needs are covered, we cannot speak about complex solutions, because complex solution we can build only on stepping stones or building stones covering all the sectors which have been also mentioned by Richard. This may sound obvious, but we are facing difficult situation because there is inflation, global crisis. Ukraine is draining resources of UN and other organizations. So it's good to remind us. And now, speaking about protracted crises, we can call them acute crises, but some of these crises last for decades. And it's clear that people living in these settings, in this environment, in the refugee camps or urban setting, for example, in Syria or neighboring countries, they have very different complex needs, and moreover, the host communities are often getting into very similar situation in terms of humanitarian needs. We can take just, for example, Lebanon, which is more familiar to me, where the whole country has fallen into economic financial crisis, and this is kind of this big forces at play undermining, in my view, any plans, master plans for complex solutions. But just for the sake of our discussion, of course, besides being able to flexibly adapt to these environments and cover the very basic needs, we also need to have something like complex overall approach, I would call it. Maybe not a complex solution, but a complex overall approach, because as it was mentioned by Richard, these protracted crises or acute humanitarian crises are very multidimensional, and if we cover only one of these sectors, something is somehow lacking. And I would just shortly mention, I don't know how much time is left there. Yeah, 1 or 2 minutes? 2 minutes. Just from the Diaconia perspective, just to mention how we are trying to approach this situation and provide assistance. We work through local communities, local community partners, CBOs, church communities in these in some of these countries, and we find they are very well suited for devising solutions, because they live in these communities, they are rooted in these communities, they have been there for long years, sometimes decades. And we as Diaconia are always sitting in the back seat and trying to support this partner, which we have built partnership with over years. This, I think, gives a chance to maybe adapt more flexibly and have this holistic approach. But of course, on the other hand, it's only on the micro level. It's very difficult to scale up the assistance. So either you need to be very big and have very complex program, or you need to do things on the micro scale, which we are which is our approach. And thanks to our community partners, I think we are trying, or we are sometimes succeeding to integrate all different areas of humanitarian needs in these settings. I'm sorry, I probably don't have more time to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that we will have some time in discussion, so, or if you are interested, so I guess that you can then catch up with Eric later on. But with this, I would like to move to the environment that we were not really talking about yet in this panel. And I would like to welcome Pavel Růžička, who will talk about cities. And I think that this is really important part here, because so far we were really talking about rural communities, but also we need to think of the resilience of urban areas. So with this, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So just a brief introduction. I'm coming from the organization EMPRESS, which focuses on issues of, we call it sustainable consumption production. Originally, we were used to work more with companies, but in recent years, we implement projects rather in public sector, and we work with several cities. One of the specific programs I would like to introduce is so-called Green Cities program, which is currently the, I would say, headline initiative of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And it targets cities in EBRD countries of operation that include some of the countries in Asia and Africa, in particular Caucasus, Central Asia, Mediterranean area, and many countries in Europe, especially Central Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, like Balkan and post-Soviet countries. And it's recognized that cities face several challenges on one side in environmental area, but also, of course, in other areas. So there is a, let's say, high energy and carbon intensity. They face a problem of impacts of climate change, but also problems like demographic changes, air quality, and so on. And this is the response of EBRD to say, develop such, say, complex action plans for those cities to help them address these challenges. So the aim of the action plan is to propose some key programs for future, key activities, key measures to be implemented. And as I said, not only in environmental area. Originally, the program really was focused on issues like waste management, water management, air quality, and so on. But now it's quite more complex. So we tackle the problems of climate resilience, of transport, also smart solutions, digitalization, some gender issues, and so on. There are usually three main components when approaching the cities. The first, and of course the most important, is to assess the current situation and prioritize these challenges in environmental and other areas. So the goal is to identify concrete solutions. On one side, technical investment solutions, but also some solutions we can call like soft measures that can include some capacity building and educational programs and so on. Definitely the very important part is financing, because cities in these countries also face a lack of financing for investment in infrastructure. So there is a goal to identify potential financial sources. The one can be, of course, still EBRD to provide some soft loans for investment in infrastructure, like, I don't know, reconstruction of wastewater treatment plants or remediation of landfills. But also we try to identify potential other either national or international sources, but also private sources, for instance, some PPP projects or direct private investment. And last but not least, what's third component of GCAPS is capacity building. So there is, as it was said by all speakers, so involvement of local actors is quite important, and also in development of these GCAPS is one of the key areas. So we try to work not only with the city, with public administration and public organizations, but also with local actors like NGOs and entrepreneurs and other interested persons and public. There are, well, to go in detail, there are a series of workshops to involve all these actors. There is a final conference or final big event, and then city can prioritize some specific topics when we can deliver concrete, say, seminars, workshops, or some capacity building programs, either for public servants or also for enterprises, for instance. And what's the final step? There must be the approval, the official approval by the City Council, so the Green City Action Plan becomes an official strategic document of the city. And this is the condition in order that the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development is willing to invest in those specified measures and investment plans. So that was in brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm thinking, based on all of your contributions, I'm really thinking that so far the term complex solution is quite a blur, because I think that everyone is approaching it from different angle. And for example, as Eric was talking about it, it's rather not that the solution is suggesting that it's quite a definitive, right? That we find a solution and that's the end. But in fact, I feel that it's rather a process, because this, for example, what Mr. Ružička was describing, right? This like engagement, and the same was for Richard. And I would like to invite you maybe very quickly to think of, like, if you should define complex solution in one sentence, so what would it be? Or maybe it might be actually the floor for audience as well, but 2 sentences, okay. I won't be that harsh. Okay, perfect.
If we speak about humanitarian crisis and protracted crisis, it's mostly the state of poverty, like very simply defined. And this poverty is in terms of education, in terms of nutrition, in terms of healthcare. So the complex solution should be something covering or fighting this poverty in all its aspects.
Thank you very much. Is it something that you are agreeing with, or you have some other opinion? Okay.
Well, I like Eric's term, not complex solution, but complex approach, which is really the work we do in GCAP. So we try to look over all the sector, all the specific problems, but then pick up a specific which are the most important and that can be implemented in the next, let's say, 3-5 years, and that will increase the quality of life of the citizens, which I think should be the, let's say, the main goal of these programs and projects.
Thank you very much.
So I think that the complex solution in some development issue can be said as to make all stakeholders and especially beneficiaries involved, fully involved and sustainably involved.
Thank you.
I'm gonna precisely build up on that and say that it would be in opposition to a simple solution that might be a quick part to something, to a problem. Sustainability is the key word. I fully agree on a complex solution.
Thank you. Okay, before I give a floor to the audience, I have last burning question, which is not that tricky as this one, because I think that what connects like all of your contributions is technology. That and I think that it's also something that relates to the panels we heard yesterday. That I think that we very often use quite a lot of technologies, but my thinking is. How is these technologies being accepted? Because if these are the key element of the complex solutions, so then how the people in the communities, the beneficiaries, are actually accepting these technologies that are being introduced into the communities? Go ahead, Richard.
I'll respond to this one perhaps better than the previous one. I think the issue here is not necessarily technology as an idea in itself, but appropriate technology. And I think when we talk about technology, we automatically assume iPhones and iPads and mobiles and things like this. Technology is often about the local communities themselves being able to find slightly different solutions. We can talk about positive deviance, if you like, as a new idea, a new technology for the community. We see a lot of natural plants, moringa being one of them. There's others in southern Ethiopia that have amazing coagulation properties for water purification. This is nothing particularly technological, let's say. You grind it, you throw it in water, a lot of the sediment disappears. So we should be looking where possible, not just to introduce external technology, but to identify the technological innovations that we often see in communities that are being forced to adapt a lot of the time. And to a certain extent, many of those ideas are the things that we should take on. I mean, the idea of this water purification thing, just as an example, how much money do humanitarians spend every year on pure tablets that are the standard for sort of humanitarian wash responses in camps, etc.? Millions and millions. A few companies are making a very nice deal. Are we even looking for other solutions that perhaps can be created by the communities that would become the biggest funding stream that they would have ever seen, because they would supply every single IDB camp in the world? This kind of innovation and maybe technology is perhaps where we need to be looking more as well.
Thank you. Does any of you want to react on Richard?
Well, I definitely agree what Richard said. And I can mention, for example, we are sometimes delivering technologies to Ethiopia, to Zambia, and we have to based on what is locally available. Yeah, this is, for us, this is the best approach, because if we deliver something what is available here and the local communities don't know this technology, it's difficult for them to accept it. Yeah, so for example, we were thinking about oil presser, and we have to consider if the oil presser should be on electricity, on manual, or anything else. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I was also talking a lot about technical solutions that are, say, offered by Green City Action Plans. On the other hand, sometimes it seems that we try to solve social problems by technologies, which maybe is not appropriate. So if I give example, if there is a bad air quality in a city due to high traffic, so is the solution switching all to electric cars and CNG buses, or is the solution to show people how they can move in other way throughout the city? So this is not, it's not only about technical solutions, but also there was said a lot of about the habits of people and in proper management. So these soft measures are also very important.
Thank you very much.
I would use an example of a food processing center in Cambodia, which we have helped to establish. Also, I think Holistic Solution and Mendel University is involved in this project. And I think it's also a nice example of collaboration between university company, NGO, and local cooperatives. Some more details are there on the poster. But it reminds me that what Richard has said, that something what is called technology can be something low tech, and we are using there for drying mango, processing the harvest of mango, solar dryers, which are using like the natural energy, because using the energy from the grid might be too expensive. So. And we also were considering supplying to this food processing center machine for deep freezing, but we found out this machine is not only very expensive, but it would consume a lot of energy, and of course it breaks down, it may be unrepairable in the local conditions. So this is just that simplicity sometimes, and scaling up good solutions which are simply sometimes the best way.
Thank you. This brought me to my really last question, and I promise then I'll give the space for you as well. But what are the trade-offs of these complex solutions? Because I think that you just started to tackle this this area of talking like what are the pros and cons, and where you have to do some deciding process on like what's good or what's feasible and what's not. So what are the trade-offs? Yeah, Marta, go ahead.
The big trade-off, for example, that as we are trying to tackle by all means, is that these complex solutions, as we said, they required a lot of actors involved mandatorily, and that generates at the same time big bureaucratic processes. So that's, for example, when I was describing the several tools that as we have identified to personalize our Nexus approach, the approach that we have to complex crisis. First and foremost, as basic as it sounds, is a standard operating procedures, deciding how we work together, how we soften the burden of this communication informations that are at the same time the blessing of these complex solutions, talking to each other, getting information from each other, but that also can really slow down the processes. And for us, is the major trade-off that we are trying to tackle this way.
Thank you very much. Does any of you want to react on it or add some other experience with trade-offs? Not really. Okay, so then I would like to ask you, the audience, if you have any questions to our great panelists. Or comments. Yeah, there's someone.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting points. I'm Marek Stis from People in Need. The next panel is on Ukraine, and I think it's showing clearly that we cannot have this discussion only in the context of the natural environmental disaster and situations, but the conflicts as well. And 80% of the global humanitarian needs are not generated at this moment by the environmental issues, but by the disasters, by the conflicts, and by the forced displacement generated from the conflict. So the question is really, how do we apply this community level resilience building, DRR, and so on the conflict situation, and particularly speaking about these vicious, heavy machinery, large-scale conflicts as Middle East, Syria, Libya, Ukraine nowadays, and particularly on the situation not on the rural communities where you can build some sort of resilience for the recurrent conflicts, but how to build a resilience of the people trapped in the conflicts in the cities like Aleppo, like Grozny, like eastern Ukrainian cities. I think this is the big question. And we don't see the community complex solutions for these situations. We just bringing this discussion on a completely different level, which is that country level peace solutions, international solutions, deconflicting, conflict mitigation, etc., etc. So just a statement, let's not forget this wider dimension of the resilience to these super acute needs that we see globally and growing, unfortunately. And maybe a question to the panelists, how do you think we should relate this debate to the conflict situations? Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Marta.
Thanks a lot. This is a very interesting question. It relates to a question that was posed by one of the tech ministry representative yesterday is on how we keep on engaging in this sort of conflict situations where, for example, the political instability of a government doesn't allow us anymore to cooperate with them. And I fully agree with you that it's something we should not forget. That's why we try as much as possible to keep working on what we've called several names, basic needs, individual measures, special measures. In the EU lingo, we call it like that, but which is basically trying as much as possible and through direct engagement through NGOs, not working with governments where the funds might be diverse, on keeping on working on those basic needs, on livelihoods, on maintaining the support as much as possible in order to reduce the burden on humanitarian actors and at the same time to be ready to, as soon as the cooperation can be resumed, to have some work that has been built, not to withdraw completely from where we are. And it's an approach that we have currently in all of the countries where we had cooperation and that needed to be stopped because of the political instability, and that we aim to keep on pursuing because it's fundamental.
Does any of the other panelists want to react? Yeah, sure.
Maybe just a few words. One of the action plans we developed was in Lviv in Ukraine, which is the city also affected by the war, not so much as the eastern part. And it's clear that the solutions and measures we provided in the action plan are not at the moment so important for them as the issue of as the war and the issue of saving life and so on. And the cities will need some restoration after the war, and I still believe that the part of the solution can be what we identify in those action plans. So we offer solutions. We call them complex solution, but it's complex in, let's say, environmental and smart city point of view. But of course, we omit all the others aspect that you mentioned. But I believe that these measures can be part of the solution in future for future innovation of the city.
Thank you. I think that Richard has also something to say.
Yeah, I mean, you've asked a tough question, Marek, because in these kind of very quick scale-up conflicts such as Ukraine, of course, there's extremely little preparation time. In many other parts of the world, Ethiopia, Congo, etc., we've got chronic conflict that has been going on for years. And in that situation, we don't actually want to build resilience of people in conflict. The last thing we want them to do is normalize living under those kind of conditions. So I think the focus is more on coping strategies when it happens, make sure that there is preparation in place so that they know if they have to run, they're going to be taking something with them that protects the kids or at least gives them some food, etc., etc., if time permits, of course. Surveillance, therefore, and information provision is probably the best way of being able to build some, let's not call it resilience, but at least coping and adapting capacity of communities in those situations. I think the other part is we need to identify, and this is where development actors struggle, because very often it's perceived as a conflict all over that place, but in fact that's generally in pockets, and there are plenty of places where we should still be doing development programming and a lot more recovery programming, and that linkage is not identified. The development actors run away from it, and it's left to the humanitarian owners who don't really know how to do that kind of work at all. And this is where we also need to be much better in terms of context analysis and a localized perspective of what the interventions look like. If you do treat it homogeneously like a state, that whole area of Tigray, you can't possibly do anything. That's not necessarily true. That's what we perhaps need to think about.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I know that the question was especially about the cities, but I would like to add a little bit from the countryside or from the rural areas. We have some experience from Yemen, where also the conflicts are actual, and that often to mitigate the impact of conflict help to the local people the diversification of their agriculture production and the establishing of home gardens, because sometimes happens that all their crops from the field were taken as a food for the soldiers, but if they had another home gardens with some permaculture production or something like this, so it was still good for their food security at least.
Thank you.
Just very shortly, it's a very difficult question, obviously, and I agree that there can't be community-based solutions, lasting solutions without reconstruction, call it, in this environment, and we simply cannot put everywhere a solar panel on each school or in community center. We need to restore the electricity grid, and I think that very broadly speaking, it's very important to prevent the states from failing, to become failed states completely, if it's still possible. And that's why I think support for Ukraine as a state is so much essential. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, please. The mic is coming. And yeah, and then see you.
Very good morning to you, Josef Oriško, the Czech MFA, project program evaluations and peace building anthropology trainings. When it comes to complex solution, the donors volunteer and have safe place to return, while the beneficiaries have, in most cases, no choice. So we should get to know each other more, and we should learn more one from another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe I will like get it into the question, because I think that this is really important and this is something that was really vital in this panel. But how to then get know each other in these processes? Because I think that this is something that where your question was heading, right? So the question to you, like, if we are designing the complex solution, so how to get each other in this process? Marta, please.
Thank you very much for this statement. I fully agree on, and it reminded me of something that was in one of the projects that was presented yesterday in the second panel, that was highlighted, that might sound very simple again, but sometimes the most simple factors are the best components of the complex solution. That it's continuously surveying the populations, the beneficiaries, through the development of a program, being sure that we are listening to the people, that we're hearing how is it impacting them, and being able to change whatever is not working on the process, or strengthening whatever it's working. And it really caught my attention yesterday as something that sometimes is overseen or put just as check in the checklist, but that should be one of the first and foremost fundamental inputs that we have, in both in the design, but also in the updating of a program while it's being developed.
I think a key aspect of that is, of course, national organisations, NGOs, civil society. They are the only ones that really can feed into this. We may go, and as much as we take visitors from the MFAs and the embassies, etc., to go and show them a project, generally, you know, it's quite a well choreographed kind of event. It's not particularly dirty or nice and nasty, etc. sometimes, so it's not realistic. Our field officers and our program guys, our partners in the field, they of course have this voice, and our job is to make sure that they are able to organise to be able to provide this kind of representation and input into the other structures where of course the money and the decisions are mainly being taken.
Thank you. There was another question in the audience here in the front. Perfect.
My name is. Do you hear me? Okay. My name is Vladimir Marcinkevich. I'm Ukrainian, so my question would be about the cities. I'm from Bankwatch organization. That's why we are monitoring the Green Cities Action Plans as well as the part of the portfolio of the EBRD and EIB as well in part. So my question, my comment first is that our experience on monitoring such projects was that it is, of course, case by case successes that can be reported, and the main issue that we are having with these action plans is that the successes which is measured are mostly related to the cuts of the greenhouse gases emissions. And then the affordability issues, the public consultations, and the inclusion of the vulnerable groups, mostly in the cities, are left to the consideration of the municipalities mostly, but not controlled by the funders or so. So this is the main issues that we are having with those programs. And the question is, those programs mostly were covering big cities, I would say. In Ukraine, it was only, 7 cities? And several of them are dropped out, as Mariupol. So how would you see the scale up of those programs for Ukraine? Because there will be a huge demands, even like from smaller to the bigger cities. What would you advise?
Thank you for the feedback and for your question. Just to react on your comment regarding greenhouse gases. Well, I see this is the trend to say calculate everything in greenhouse gases and not to focus so much on other aspects and other indicators that might be important. this is true, and it happens with green city action plans as well. That's the say the mandatory part is calculation of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So this is well, this is something which is monitored, mandatory, and I agree that there is a there would be beneficial to have also some other indicators. That's true that green city action plans usually focus on big cities. On the other hand, as far as I know, EBRD is now, let's say, trying to also address smaller cities. So at the moment, the program is available for cities from 100,000 inhabitants up, and there are also some smaller cities possible. And what we tried was also once we have the knowledge how to implement the Green City Action Plan, so we try to offer it also to smaller cities through Czech Development Aid. So we already implemented one. We call it also Green City Action Plan, although it wasn't the official one. We did one in Serbia for really smaller city. So this is what we can implement within some other grant schemes. No? So not only the official one under EBRD. So there is a chance that say companies and consultants who already worked on these big cities and big action plans can also implement them in smaller cities. So, but it's not to approach them through EBRD, but probably more directly.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments, or actually you can even disagree with what our panelists are saying. So this is really a discussion. So yeah, yeah, perfect.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Ronchini from the World Food Programme in the Resilience and Food Systems Division. Firstly, I want to say thank you to the panel, the really interesting points which I think resonate, you know, all along the problems and the complex issues that are facing. I found it really interesting that, you know, we're looking at how to bring together private sector, communities, you know, the players together. What I didn't hear, though, and I'm quite interested about, is the role of government, be it national or decentralized government in all of this. You know, if we really want to be looking at a long-term solution and sustainably, government has to be involved. My initial question was actually to the colleagues from the universities and Holistic Solutions, which is, you know, that those activities that you had, that you brought together, was, you know, government involved in that? If yes, what are the challenges in actually bringing them in, or do you see any opportunities in bringing government, whether national or decentralized, into that particular process? But then as I thought about it, I actually thought that actually it's a question that could be applied to any of the presentations that we heard this morning. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think that it's really a needed question. So who want to go first?
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe just to be sure, you mean the government of the beneficiary country or the government? Yeah, of the beneficiary country. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So of course, in our case, if we speak about Ethiopia, the government is involved in our activities there, especially if when we support, when we try to help to run the business for the new entrepreneurs there, for the small companies, or for the let's say the cooperatives of the people who are starting their business. So they are fully involved and they are really supporting it, because of course the government knows that it's one of the big problems, especially the work opportunities in this rural area. But as Ethiopian government often doesn't support it practically, because they are awaiting that when the NGO or anybody from the foreign donor is there, so all the finances goes behind the project implementer. That's also our case.
Thank you. And maybe I'm wondering, how does it work in the humanitarian sector? Because you were talking about this work in the refugee camps. So how does it work what's the role of government there?
I have quite limited experience with that, but as a reply to your question, from what I've observed in medical projects, we have assisted medevac projects. We have worked with the local hospitals, which were part of the local national health system, and they were in the proximity of the refugee camps. They were helping both the local community, hosting community, and the refugee community. And it's important to strengthen this their infrastructure, because they are often in very marginalized area of those anyway quite poor countries economically. So and I think the national government sees this as a win-win solution, because basically they have in mind caring for their own population, if at all, but in the first place is the local population, even in those marginalized area. But solutions which are supporting this national infrastructure strengthening might be somehow should be kind of the backbone, because and of course it needs to be integrated into the plan that these facilities serve both refugees and the host local community.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to say something? Yeah, perfect.
I mean, as our colleague from WFP knows very well, it depends on which country you're in. And it depends if you're operating in a conflict where the government is part of that conflict. Their engagement in your program essentially creates security risks that are untenable, so you wouldn't do it. But I think when you're looking at complex solutions, for example, nutrition, probably a good example. What we want to see is improved protocols. We want to see better policies in place. Part of the positive deviance approach would be to influence the Ministry of Health's policy to enable that kind of rollout. You can't do it without having that engagement and their participation in the first place. This is often, though, on regional government levels. I think the Cambodia situation, when you're dealing with water management and monitoring, you have to involve not just the federal state in terms of this is a potential scale-up approach, but every single province down that river who's going to be participating in the scheme itself and feeding into it. So, yeah, without that engagement, that's clear, but at the same time, there needs to also be a healthy objectivity and distance, so you're not seen as the implementation arm of that government, because otherwise you are impacting on your potential neutrality and independence in terms of operation. It's not a full answer, but...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I completely, fully agree. Indeed, I was going to make the point that it really depends on whether we're talking about a crisis that is generated out of a natural disaster, for example, or whether it's generated because one of the factors that the government in place, it's unstable, and it's a government we're not being able to cooperate it with in normal terms. And as Richard just said, when it's that case, when it's the case of a government where it's a political unstable situation, you cannot risk to compromise the diversion of your funds, the corruption, and it's precisely where it's very important to strengthen this cooperation between all the pillars, because in that case it might be the peace pillar, it might be diplomacy and political dialogue who sustain this involved cooperation with the government or the actor in the power at the moment, while you're doing your development programs on basic needs, cooperating with impartial actors, with local NGOs or impartial actors, still ensure that when the situation comes back to normality, you have not done a completely different thing of what you should be doing because of not being in touch with the government. So precisely that, it's a very, very delicate barrier where it's very important to be context specific and see which is the best place actor to discuss. Well, for example, if you're talking about a country where the crisis generated by a natural disaster of a refugee crisis, like is the case of Uganda, where there's not an ongoing conflict, but there's a lot of humanitarian development needs coming from the refugee inflows of neighboring countries. In that case, it's much more easier and it's happening. In Uganda is the beautiful example of the comprehensive refugee response framework, it's called, yeah, of where the government is leading, each of the ministries of the government has lead, and then all the development, humanitarian, and peace actors have developed their lines of work and their collective outcomes that have been defined with the government.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay. There's a question. Yeah, perfect. The mic is coming.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm Evelyn from Oxfam, and I have more of a comment, and you said we can also challenge a bit, so I would like to do that, but mindfully. Because in the panel, Peter, you mentioned that it's important for people to stay where they are, right? That's one of the reasons why we want to foster resilience of local communities, and that's a comment that I would like to challenge a bit, because when people migrate, it's often for many different reasons, because they want to be with family, because they seek educational opportunities, because they seek economic opportunities. I think half of the people in the room have done the same. And if people would say to us, you need to stay where you are because it's better for you, I don't think that we would be very happy. I am also an economic migrant, and I see the benefits of that. So I think instead of making sure that people stay where they are, or focusing our interventions on resilience, on making sure that people stay in the country where they are or in the village that they are, it's important to make sure that they have opportunities to grow, and whether that is having economic opportunities in the country where they are, in the village or the community where they are, to just do that because that's good for them instead of because they then don't migrate. And I'm making this comment because it's such it's seeping into a lot of development projects. The Global Europe NDICI also has a 10% marker for all of its development aid going to a project that focuses on migration somehow. And we as international organizations pushed really hard to get that number down, because it was in that proposal in the NDICI, because countries in Europe are very anxious of migration, and particularly migration to Europe, whereas we see that, again, migration is often a coping mechanism and something that we should support. So I wanted to challenge that comment a little bit, or maybe hear some reflections from you on it.
Thank you very much. That's
Yeah, thank you very much for this comment. I absolutely agree. I think it's of course case to case. Yeah, in this case, Arba Minch and area around, which is agriculture area and producing a huge amount of fruits, for example, and all the fruits is it's exported from there without any processing, without any added value. And all the people, even they are producing a huge amount of fruit, they still being quite poor, because the sellers, the buyers are buying it for very low money and selling in, for example, Addis Ababa for much bigger money. So that's in this kind, I see it that if people stay and they start to process the fruit, or they start to process another agriculture product, so they can keep the added value in the region, in the area, and they can also make the quality of their life higher. Because sometimes, of course, it happens that when the people go from there out to Addis Ababa, which is already overcrowded, and the quality of their life is not better there. Yeah. But as you say, as I also said, it's case to case. Sometimes it's better to stay, sometimes it's better to go. Thank you.
yeah, Marta. No.
Is it working now? Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Again, fully agree. Of course, there's a marker of 10% because migration is a reality, and it's a reality that we're facing. And we need to put in place the mechanisms in order to tackle the problems that come out for the ultimate beneficiaries. At the same time, completely agree on that. What we need to be working on, it's precisely on generating that value for the communities, and that's why in DK Global Europe, at the same time, the focus has been put, as we were commenting on yesterday in the first panel, on especially in that fragile and conflict-affected context in the 4 pillars of democratic participation, strengthening the rule of law, human rights, and sustainable development. As you say, I'm an economic migrant myself too, so I really understand. It really resonates with me. And even if there are like particular markers that are put in place to face the current phenomena that need to be addressed, of course, the major focus and the big core of our work is still going to be on generating this local value for these communities.
Thank you very much. Maybe I have just like one add-on, because I think that what is really important to mention, and I think that Emily was already kind of suggesting it, is that most of the migration is actually happening within the African continent. And so maybe we shouldn't be really focusing on preventing people to migrate to Europe, but rather to create the conditions for those who are migrating within the region. And maybe that might be the way where we should be really like streaming our efforts. So, but with this, I would like to very much thank you to all the panelists, to all the great questions from the audience. I think that there was like quite a lot of food for thought, and but I think that it's really important to like a takeaway from this this panel is to understand complex solutions as a process, as an approach, rather than something indefinite, that we need to really cooperate across different actors. We need to actively engage with communities. We need to set up this dialogue so we are not imposing our solutions on the people, and we are really listening to them, and also that we should be creating such conditions that are improving the lives of people in communities, but at the same time creating opportunity windows for maybe go somewhere else and to start the lives again in a better vibe. So with that, I would like to once again thank you and invite you for 15 minutes coffee break, or actually 20 minutes because we end up 3 minutes earlier. So we will be back in 11:15 for the panel on Ukraine. Thank you.